Billionaire follows his employee after work. What he discovers makes him fall in love. It was a Monday night, just shy of 9 p.m., when he saw her slip out the back door of the company building, head down, hurried steps, like someone fleeing from something or someone. Billionaire Thomas Blackwell, the powerful owner of a multinational empire whose name often graced the headlines, rarely paid attention to the faces that passed through the hallways of his corporation. But something shifted that night. He couldn't explain why, but there was something about the way she clutched her bag to her chest, as if protecting something far more precious than personal belongings, that stirred a strange unease inside him. An impulse pulled him toward the garage. Something pushed him into his car and compelled him to follow her through the misty, rain-soaked streets, where fog blurred the city lights into a surreal, cinematic blur. She didn't know she was being followed. Or maybe she did. Yet she walked like each step held a buried secret. And Thomas, used to million-dollar meetings and hollow parties with shallow people, couldn't understand why he suddenly cared so much about a junior-level employee, someone utterly invisible in his world of power. Her car was old, creaked at every turn, a sharp contrast to the luxury vehicle he followed her in from a safe distance. But it wasn't about the car or the route, it was about her. Something in her radiated a silent cry for help, though not a single word escaped her lips. What he would discover that night wouldn't just shatter every certainty he had about the world, it would change the way he saw life and love. But before I tell you what Thomas saw when she stopped in that forgotten alley, hit the like button and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the end, because this story isn't about money, it's about everything money can't buy. The alley she stopped in looked like it had been abandoned by time. Trash cans tipped over, graffiti-stained walls, the distant wail of a siren. It was the kind of place Thomas would have never stepped into by choice. Yet there she was, stepping out of her car with a bag in hand and eyes sharp with the alertness of someone who'd learned to survive in chaos. He parked a few meters away, killed his headlights and watched, hypnotized. It wasn't voyeurism, it was something deeper, like opening a book you couldn't put down. For the first time in ages, he wasn't in control, and strangely, that fascinated him. Her name was Elena. She'd been hired as an administrative assistant at the company just 2 months earlier. Thomas vaguely remembered signing her paperwork, never once glancing at her resume. Now, sitting in the shadows of his car, he wondered how he'd never noticed her eyes. Elena seemed to belong to a different universe, a world built on hidden scars, unspoken silences, and hard choices. She crossed the alley, pushed through a rusted iron door, and disappeared. Thomas hesitated. Then something inside urged him to follow. Not out of suspicion, but out of instinct, out of something he couldn't yet name. Inside the building, the musty air and echoing footsteps gave the place a ghostly weight. He climbed the stairs slowly, his heartbeat pounding like he was committing a crime. On the 3rd floor, a half-open door leaked soft light and faint voices. Thomas crept closer, pressing himself against the wall beside it, and then he heard something unexpected. Laughter. Children's laughter. Elena was inside with 2 little kids. She was smiling in a way he'd never seen in the company halls, her eyes transformed. It was like every mask she wore dissolved in that small, dark apartment, and finally, the real world could breathe with her. Thomas didn't understand it at first, but he felt it. That place, as humble as it was the only space where she truly existed. And something shifted in him. For the first time, he saw someone not as a cog in his business machine, but as a living story. A woman carrying far more than folders and reports. But why was she hiding this? Why work late hours and return to a place like that, and still smile as if pain didn't exist? Thomas knew he needed to find out more. Not out of curiosity, but because in a way he didn't yet understand, he was already too involved to walk away. In the days that followed, Thomas tried to convince himself it was a passing impulse, a fluke, a fantasy born from the boredom of a predictable life. But that was a lie. Ever since that night, something had been lit inside him, and it refused to burn out. For the first time in years, he began arriving at the office early, not to review contracts, not to issue commands, but to see her, from a distance, subtly. He observed Elena's quiet steps through the hallways, the way she greeted colleagues with a reserved smile, how she masked exhaustion behind an impeccable posture. No one there knew she returned every night to a tiny apartment with 2 kids. No one knew that, for her, working at the company wasn't a career, it was survival. Without understanding why, Thomas started coming up with excuses to get closer. A report that needed hand delivery, a spontaneous meeting to discuss vague data he couldn't explain. All of it was just an act. He wanted to hear her voice for longer. He wanted to discover who Eleanor was beyond the quiet professional everyone overlooked. But there was an invisible wall between them. Something in her screamed for distance. Not out of arrogance, but as a shield, like someone who had learned in the hardest way possible that trusting people is the first step to being hurt. And while Thomas tried to draw nearer, Elena watched him with wary eyes. She knew who he was. She knew the power he held. And she also knew people like him never got close without a reason. Her defense mechanisms were on high alert. Every word he spoke, every gesture, she dissected it carefully. But something troubled her even more than fear. The sense that he saw something in her she'd buried long ago. Something she no longer believed she deserved. Humanity, dignity, beauty. One afternoon after work, Eleanor found an envelope clipped to her car mirror. No sender, no signature, just a folded sheet with a handwritten sentence. "The way you love in silence is the loudest thing I've ever heard." Her heart raced. There was no way to know who wrote it, but a part of her already knew. And that terrified her more than any unpaid bill, more than any past due notice, more than any fear life had taught her. Because when someone starts seeing what you try to hide, you lose control. And Elena knew she was about to lose something, or maybe gain what she never believed she deserved. On that rainy Friday, Elena almost didn't go to work. Her youngest had a fever. The fridge was empty. A red eviction notice clung to her door. But she went, because she always did. Because ever since life took everything from her, she'd learned not to rely on anyone, not on promises, not on shoulders to cry on. So she got up, dressed in her most presentable outfit, and faced the world with her usual quiet courage. But that wouldn't be an ordinary Friday. And the universe wasn't about to let her go unnoticed. Thomas was waiting for her in the elevator, not as her boss, not as a billionaire, but as a man. And there was something in his eyes that said no. Without asking permission, he invited her for a talk in his office. Elena hesitated, but followed. Her heart raced. Her mind searched for reasons, fear, curiosity, desire, distrust, all at once. As soon as the door closed, Thomas didn't waste time. "Why have you never asked for help?" She stood silent. The floor vanished beneath her feet. He knew. Somehow, he knew. In a quiet voice, Elena said only, "Because help comes with a price, and I can't afford it." Thomas swallowed hard. She wasn't a victim. She was a warrior. And in that moment, he understood the weight she carried. And maybe, for the first time in his life, he didn't want to buy anything. He wanted to earn it. He wanted to be part of her life, not as a savior, but as someone willing to listen without judgment, to stay without conditions, to care without invading. Then, in a moment of reckless honesty, Thomas did something unthinkable for a man of his stature. He quit, not the company, but the pedestal. He began spending time in the same places she did, walking the same streets where she lived, meeting her neighbors, seeing her world, without promising anything, just being there, just being someone. And the closer he got, the more she pulled away. Until one day, she screamed at him on the sidewalk, "Why are you doing this? Go away, you don't understand." And he replied, "Because I saw the way you hold your boys, and I've never seen anyone love like that, and it changed me." She cried, For the first time, in front of him, in front of everyone, she cried like someone finally letting someone see the pain. And in that moment, the world stopped. The viewer stops too, because this isn't a cheesy love scene. This is two worlds colliding, two scarred souls trying to recognize each other. But it's not the end. There's still a truth Thomas doesn't know. And once he finds out, everything might break, or everything might begin. The following week, Thomas stopped seeing her at the company. No sign, no message, no explanation. Elena had vanished like a dream the moment you wake up. And all that was left were questions burning in silence. He tried looking for her. In HR, at the address he had seen, even among their co-workers, but no one knew anything. The apartment was empty. The lights were off. The sound of children's laughter was gone. It was as if she had never existed. But Thomas knew something had happened, and he wouldn't be able to rest until he understood why. That's when, while digging through old hiring files, in a near-desperate attempt to find her, he discovered what she never had the courage to tell him. Elena wasn't just a mother of two, she was a sister, an older sister and the sole legal guardian of two nephews who had lost their parents in a fire 3 years ago. Her own parents. What he thought were her sons were actually a promise made in the middle of flames and screams. Elena had run into that burning house trying to save everyone. She managed to get the two boys out, but her parents didn't survive. Ever since that day, she had carried not only the responsibility of raising the kids, but also the guilt of not being able to do more. Thomas read everything in silence, and he cried in a way he didn't even know was possible, because now he understood the source of her strength, the reason behind the silence, the weight behind her pain, and also the meaning of that look in her eyes he had never been able to decipher. It was the look of someone who had come face to face with the end and chose to keep going out of love. That night when he returned home, he found a letter under his door, handwritten. It was from her. "I left because I fell in love, and the thought of losing the only thing I've managed to build, my boy's peace, terrified me. You saw me in a way I didn't even know was possible, but sometimes the truest kind of love is the one that knows when to walk away." Thomas's heart shattered, but along with the pain, something new came. Clarity. He didn't need to save her. She didn't need a savior. She just needed to be seen. And he saw her. Months passed, and on a sunny Saturday in a quiet park, Thomas was walking alone until he heard a familiar laugh, loud, real. He turned toward the sound, and there she was, sitting on the grass, the two boys beside her. Her eyes met his. For a moment the world stood still again, but this time there was peace, and without saying a word, she smiled. It wasn't an invitation, nor a goodbye. It was just the beginning, the true start of something that doesn't need promises to be real.